Support for the Health Channel podcast comes from Florida Cancer Specialists. Florida Cancer Specialists urges everyone not to postpone recommended screenings such as mammograms, colonoscopies, or biopsies. Regular screenings save lives. More at flcancer.com/getscreened.
Hello, and welcome to tonight's Town Hall, a closer look at autism and how early intervention and therapies are making an impact. I'm your host, Sandra Viktorova. Well, about 1 in 54 children in the U.S. is diagnosed with an autism spectrum disorder, that according to the CDC. Boys are 4 times more likely to be diagnosed with autism than girls. Early intervention and therapy can help to overcome the challenges of autism. Experts say that early action can benefit these children well into adulthood. So recreational activities like sports, hobbies, and music can have an especially positive impact on people with autism, giving them the chance to practice social skills, discover an untapped talent, and increase self-confidence. Well, tonight, how this early intervention can impact autistic people and communities for a lifetime. And we meet 4 young people on the autism spectrum who have beaten the odds thanks to sports and music. But first, let's meet tonight's panel. Joining me is attorney Haley Moss. Haley is also an author, artist, and autism advocate. And Haley is known as the first openly autistic attorney in Florida. And Jennifer Feinstein, case manager with UM-NSU CARD, that is the Center for Autism and Related Disabilities. Thank you, ladies, both of you, for joining me. So Haley, let's start with you. You were diagnosed with autism when you were 3 years old. You credit early intervention with helping you get to where you are today. Tell us about the therapies that helped you and helped you along on your journey.
Absolutely. So I actually want to start backing up a little bit leading up to that diagnosis is that I was largely nonverbal and I was able to do all of these different jigsaw puzzles and I was able to read, but I wasn't able to communicate. So most of what was going on is I would be crying and screaming and pointing at things, but I didn't have any language. So to help me learn to speak and to help me gain social skills and to interact with the world around me, what my parents did is we did things like speech therapy, we did things like occupational therapy, and also floor time, which is basically engaging with children through play and toys and entering their world to help them unlock ways to communicate and meet them where they are as well.
So Haley, one thing I know tonight we talked about the importance of perhaps shattering stereotypes. And when we talk about this, having access to early intervention and therapies early on, why do you think it's important that we all care about this issue? Because there may be people out there who don't have a loved one or a friend who has autism. Why should all of us care about this issue, making sure that especially children get diagnosed early and that they get the help that they need? Haley, why should we all care about this?
I think a really great place to start is kind of with the story of autism and who gets diagnosed. So access to early intervention is exactly that. It's an accessibility issue, whether or not we're thinking of it that way. And like you mentioned in the intro to the show, a lot of people who are diagnosed with autism are boys. And this is also kind of something that we see later on in life. So I'm in my mid-20s. And what happens is a lot of women and people of color as well and other minorities and marginalized folks get diagnosed later. So we need to close that diagnostic gap. So people are getting services earlier in life and do have the ability to discover talents, to help them with things that are difficult in life, and that we give people the best shot that they have, especially on this journey. Because I think something a lot of autistic people deal with, especially in our lives, is this identity and journey of self-discovery of what does autism mean to me? What does this mean for my life going forward? And when people have those answers earlier on, and families have those answers earlier on, we're able to get to a point of acceptance and encouraging people to be the best that they can be and to live happy and meaningful lives, whatever that means to them.
Jennifer, I want to talk to you when we talked about the importance of early intervention. You work with adults with autism at CARD. How have you seen these benefits of early intervention firsthand?
So I think, well, first of all, there's a lot of research that supports that early intervention is really important for developing skills, and being successful So when I work with adults, people have their own story. Everyone has a different story. So some adults are like Haley, who had a lot of early intervention and have made a lot of progress. But it's really important to remember that the spectrum is broad. So we see people with different experiences. But in general, I think it's really important to think of it as incrementally improving people's skills, their ability to handle changes, to fit into how society expects people to interact, such as at school. And so the earlier we can get these children interacting with the world, the better.
Haley, I told you that I thought tonight's discussion, one of the important things was to talk about stereotypes. We see autistic characters in TV shows, movies, and they're often either portrayed as I'll say super talented in one very specific area, sort of hyper focused in one area, or sort of nonverbal. But you wanted to talk a lot about sort of shattering that stereotype, right? Just like everybody else, there's folks all over on the spectrum. So talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So there's a saying in the autism community generally that if you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. And that's the truth. And when we have this very limited view of autism that we get from TV and media and other books, for instance, what we see is we see either this one person who's like a completely gifted math genius, or we see someone who struggles greatly with taking care of themselves, with communicating with others. We don't realize that the spectrum is very broad, like Jennifer was saying earlier, is that you have people with very different profiles of traits and different struggles and different strengths. So it definitely is hurtful to people on the spectrum when we just kind of put people in these very narrow boxes of that everybody's either a tech genius or you aren't able to do anything whatsoever. So we have these views that make it very difficult, especially if you don't fit into those boxes. It's like, where do I belong? Am I not autistic enough to fit this view of society? And then you'll have people that say things relatively well-meaning, like, oh, but you don't look autistic, or I would never know because you don't fit into this box. So it almost discounts the fact that things are very difficult for you as a person with a disability.
It's about, like you said, exposing them to as many things as possible to find what's the right fit. Just like anybody else, one thing is not going to be a fit for everybody.
Exactly. We're all humans, autistic people are just humans. Yeah, like everyone.
Jennifer, Alex's mother talked about the struggle for people with autism to find employment. Explain why this is such a tough issue for so many people and how you help adults on the spectrum find a job through your work at CARD.
Yes, employment is a huge issue. And I think we can all understand why that it might be a problem if you just think about the basic process of getting a job. Many times it involves networking. Well, that's a social skill. The interview process is basically a traditional interview is like a social test, right? It's based on how you look and interact with people.
Very stressful.
Writing, it's stressful for all of us. Individuals with autism, some individuals with autism have a hard time lying. They're incredibly honest. And so teaching the idea of selling yourself, maybe everyone is expected to embellish themselves in their resume and at an interview. So all of these things make the process of finding a job difficult. And then the support needs that an individual might have when they're on the job can be difficult. So at CARD, we kind of approach it in a holistic way. So we focus on educating individuals. We have some programs that teach employment skills, employment finding skills, and also social skills on the job. So we have one called Job Club, there's job seekers. And then we also consult with businesses. So if individuals want to hire someone with autism, I'll go in and consult and help them sort of set up some good systems of support for the individual. And we also just try to, welcome companies to make their whole experience more autism friendly through our autism friendly initiative.
Haley, you fight for disability inclusion in the workplace. Why has this been so important to you And maybe you can share some of your experiences in the workplace.
I think Jennifer hit a lot of it on the head too, is that there's so much to the traditional interview, to the whole job process that's really difficult. And then there's the issue of once you're actually hired. So there's all sorts of things, whether it's like requesting accommodations, what rights you have. There's so much that goes into it. And something that really struck me while I was going through law school was this awareness of how many autistic people are either unemployed or underemployed. So they're in jobs that don't match their qualifications. And I think that was really striking to me, is that you can go through all of the school, you could be the top of your field, and you still have the odds stacked against you because people don't understand. So for me, I think what I want employers to know and what I want people to know going forward and in my work doing disability inclusion and neurodiversity in particular is that autistic people and other neurodivergent individuals belong in workplaces for equal pay, equal work, things like that. And that we're also valuable team members, that we have a lot to bring to the table, that hiring us means that you're going to get a different type of thinking, that you might have different types of problem solvers, and you will have a different approach to things.
When you said that is incredibly sad, like you said that you know, that there's probably so many talented people out there who could be doing, you know, all, for lack of a better word, much better jobs than, you know, where they're at currently, but they just, you know, they haven't been able to make it happen. So from talk real specific for me, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see companies making, big and small, and what would you like them to like start doing tomorrow to sort of open up doors that are currently not open?
I think one of the biggest things actually starts in job descriptions and recruiting. So when we talk about disability very broadly, when you read descriptions, that they already kind of make it that people with disabilities will self-select out. So even in a job that doesn't require manual labor, you might still see something like must be able to lift 500 pounds or something. I know that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but you kind of get the point, is that somebody will be like, well, I can't do that, even though they say it's the most important thing, and they won't apply. Or even just putting that people with disabilities are welcome to apply, or even a notice about accommodations, is a great way to send a signal that you take this work seriously. And also, I think the interview process has a lot of bias and misunderstanding and miscommunications between autistic and neurotypical people. So eye contact people use as the biggest measure of trustworthiness, while for some autistic people that could be very difficult, because eye contact to them means they're not going to be able to focus on what the person is saying, or it just makes them feel very uncomfortable. So I think that we kind of have to bridge this communication gap and this understanding of one another, and not just expect people to act in this very specific way that will ultimately leave them burned out, unhappy, and confused.
So Jennifer, we heard about Joel's severe anxiety, and it's a common theme in other profiles that we're going to see tonight. Why is anxiety so prevalent for people with autism? Help us understand.
Well, I mean, there's definitely a high level of comorbidity of autism and anxiety. And, you know, I think it's because what the symptoms of autism are social anxiety, adherence to routines, you know, sort of rigidity. And I think basically, the world is not necessarily autism friendly. So I think that creates a lot of anxiety to go with, you know, these things you have internally happening and go out into a world that is maybe not set up for your routines. And I think it's so important for people to be aware of anxiety because it is such a big problem. So both from the standpoint of families, it's something to consider, keep in mind. You might want to actually pursue some treatment specifically for anxiety, but also for people in the world. If you meet someone with autism, you should be aware that the person might have serious social anxiety while they're talking to you. And so I think if we can all be a little more accepting and open and aware that somebody you're talking to might be suffering from anxiety, I think we can go a long way to including people.
Haley, I want to jump to you. What kind of activities were you involved with growing up? And specifically, how do you think that those activities helped you and impacted you as an adult?
So while we were watching Joel's story, something that really stuck out to me is I actually did do theater for several years, which is something I don't usually share a lot with folks, but I did theater up until I was about 11 or 12. I also had singing solos and things like that. And for me, it was a great confidence booster. I was always in the creative stuff. I was not an athlete for very long. I rode horses for a couple of years, but I had a career-ending injury, so I was truly an arts kid. But growing up, I also did a lot of drawing and painting. I still do. I also love to write. So all of that stuff has always been things that were hobbies, and sometimes they turn into something a little bit more. And for me, I think it always made me feel calm. So a little bit of that anxiety that Jennifer mentioned is stuff that I dealt with in school. So I'd always feel very like I was playing pretend every day in some regard of like you have to act this very specific way kind of to assimilate and not to be bullied or to basically act neurotypical, for lack of a better description. It's kind of like playing pretend a lot. And I'd come home and then I would just want to draw and paint, and I'd want to do other things that would make me feel relaxed and more myself. And I think for me, those hobbies and interests really did bring me back to who I was, and they made me feel confident and relaxed and safe.
Jennifer, Layla's mom talks about the importance for autistic people to have set goals, a track. Do you agree? And if so, why?
I think, yes, we know with autism, having a structure, having a routine can help them feel secure. And so that can be very important. I think, obviously, setting goals, is super important for success. But I also want to make sure that people don't get stuck with a rigid goal for their child. So, I think what I loved about that story is that mom, like she said, she threw everything at Layla until something stuck. So she tried so many different things. So I think it's really important to be able to just go with your child, go with the experience of their life as a journey. There doesn't have to be a time frame, and we don't have to be rigid with what age we achieve our goals. But we want to just experience their lives as they grow and develop.
Jennifer, I know you at the beginning of this discussion, you pointed out to me that you felt it was very important that when we talk about early intervention, that if, that no parent feel by hearing this discussion tonight, oh my gosh, I didn't start early enough, I haven't started yet, sort of in panic mode. What is your message to them about getting help early?
Yes. So if you're watching this and you have a baby who's 12 months old and you are thinking, you know what, there's something not right. Maybe they're not smiling at me. They're not turning to their name. Then you know what? Don't let anyone, even doctors, keep you from pursuing help. Because like I said, the earlier the better. So if you are watching this and you have a tiny baby, get out there and get some help. There are screeners you can do online. But also, no matter what age your child is, it is never too late. So whenever you can start therapy or experiences is wonderful. So it's not too late. I also work with adults who aren't diagnosed until they're adults. And you know what? Now they know and they understand something about themselves and their identity, and that's powerful as well. So I just, I always worry with talk of early intervention that it's going to make people feel inadequate or like they should give up if they didn't do it. But so the answer is no, it's never too late. And this is a developmental disability that will grow and change over their lifespan.
Haley, if I can switch to you a moment, Layla was talking about being a role model to others, and certainly in the amazing work that you do professionally as an author, artist, speaker, you're a role model for others. What do you hope people will get out of your wonderful success?
I think what people should get out of stories like Layla's and like mine is that we really have powerful people behind us, is that for every person that you see that seems to be successful, and that there is no one picture of success for that matter, is we are so lucky to have the support of our families and other people who care about us and love us. And I think that's so much to be at, so much that we can do, and that's something that anyone can do no matter who you are, is that having a great support system really does move mountains for folks on the spectrum. And I think that is something especially for the adults coming into their identity or young adults that are trying to figure out, how does this impact me? What does this mean to me? I think that's a really great thing. And I think as a role model, something that's important to me and what people should be doing is just understand that autism is different in each person, and that we really just deserve the same opportunities and acceptance and inclusion as anyone else. And that's something I think that's been echoed throughout this conversation.
Okay. So we actually have a question. It's somebody basically asking, is it too late to start getting help for an 8-year-old who I guess is a high functioning adult, but is 8-year-old is being 8 too late? And I know, Jennifer, you sort of tackled that, so remind parents again.
Yes, exactly. No, it's not too late. I know ABA is applied behavioral analysis, and there is a lot of focus on early intervention with ABA. So it can feel like if you start looking up ABA centers and you see all these programs for 3 to 5 year olds or 2 to 4 year olds, it can feel like maybe there's not a place for a child to start ABA at age 8 or 15 or 25.
Sure.
But there are ABA therapists out there, and you can find them who work with all ages, basically. So it's not too late.
Haley, I wanted to really finish when we talked about being a role model and the amazing work that you're doing. What advice would you give to others on the spectrum for setting specific goals? I don't know, when you decided you want to become an attorney, was that a tough decision for you? And what advice do you have to others who want to reach really high?
I think that not to let other people stand in your way. So often in life, and I think this goes for a lot of young people and especially young people with disabilities, is that we are told every step of the way what we can't do. Is that this might be too much, you might not get an accommodation, no, they might not want you. And it's up to you to be your own biggest advocate sometimes. And that's why, again, that goes back to having that support from loved ones or friends or whoever it may be. And I think that by being your own biggest advocate, I think that really helps set the stage, in that you're the one who sets the limits on what you can and can't do. So I think when we talk about ambition and setting those goals, it's kind of ignoring the naysayers in a way. It's not even just ignoring them, but being realistic with yourself about what you can do and setting shorter term goals to get to that achievement point. So I decided I wanted to be a lawyer probably like halfway through college or so, realizing I definitely wasn't going to be a doctor. And I love to write and I love to talk and I love to help people. But I realized, like, first, when you make it into more manageable goals, it makes it a lot less overwhelming than being 18 or 19 years old and going, oh, I want to be a lawyer. That, okay, first I got to get through college, and then I can take the LSAT, and then I can apply to law school, and then I have to make it through law school, pass the bar exam, et cetera, is when we break things into more manageable goals, it doesn't feel as overwhelming. At least that's been my experience. Your mileage may vary, but you will probably have obstacles at each part of your goal, and it's up to you to be that advocate, and with the help of people you love and trust, to be able to tackle those obstacles and break down those barriers. Because again, people who have disabilities and autistic people deserve the same opportunities as anybody else.
I think so many people are going to be so inspired by you. What is your message to parents watching out there about this journey?
You know what? Life is a journey. And I'm also a parent. My son is 25. He's on the spectrum as well. And so I know it can be a shock, and it can seem like, oh my gosh, I don't know the future. But the truth is, none of us know the future. And so I think what you'll see is, if you look at it as a journey, and a journey of understanding your child and helping them to understand the world and helping the world to understand them, you'll see that it can really be a beautiful journey. And I would say to everyone getting started, you should reach out to UM-NSU CARD. Our services are all free. We're a grant from the legislature. So, we're here for you. We've got your back, and we can help you get started with ideas, therapies, activities, and everything.
And Haley, any message for parents out there who they don't know where to start, where to get help? What would you say should be the first step, and any, words of advice you have?
I think the first step in educating yourself about autism is thinking of where you're getting that information from. So I think UM is a wonderful resource. Full disclosure, they were the first place that my parents went as well. And that was nearly 25 years ago at this point. So UM is definitely somewhere that I highly recommend. And I also recommend learning from autistic people as well, because we are the experts on our own experience and kind of can help deconstruct some of that mystery stuff that you kind of learn about, like, why is there so much anxiety? Why is this going on? Why is this particular experience difficult? So there's so much learning to be done, and it's okay that you're going to have a lot of different feelings about that. And it really is a journey. And the most important thing I think you could do is, no matter what, you're going to accept and love your child. And it's up to you to help them be the best that they can be. And you're going to end up learning that there's so much beauty on this journey, and especially for autistic people. And sometimes the most frustrating thing is that the world doesn't always have autistic people in mind. And that's why we are doing the work that we do to make sure that the world is more equitable and accessible and inclusive for people who are on the autism spectrum and who also have other disabilities. So that's kind of where my mind is at right now.
Oh, beautiful words. Haley, thank you so much for that. Well, that is all the time that we have for tonight's discussion. Thank you, Haley. Thank you, Jennifer, for joining us and for all the work that you do. And thank you to everyone out there watching live. We will see you next time.